This is the 21st season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk about bass fishing. In studio guest Todd Sizer from Fisherman.
Can't get rid of me. Well, you will later today.
Later today, I'll drop you off to Oklahoma City Airport. Will Rogers
International
Airport. I've never flown international straight out of Oklahoma City. I can't figure out where do you think they fly straight?
I don't know. That's an interesting point because there's a lot of international airports that I know don't have international destinations or.
So it's false advertising?
I think it just sounds better, probably, right, for them. So,
good show with Todd on Monday. We talk a lot about in Fisherman, some of the things that they're going through. We talked about the Master Angler Awards. We talked a little bit about the
Bass Fishing Hall of Fame,
the Pan American Sport Fishing Federation tournament that was down in Mexico. A lot more coming out on Andrew Upshaw's YouTube channel, Let's Fish TV, Scott Martin stuff. But the main reason why you were in Oklahoma was you came from fishing with the legend.
Yeah, I had some planning meetings up in Minnesota for In Fisherman. Spent a day in the boat with Doug Stang, your editor, longtime editor.
Very jealous of that.
Yeah, it just happened, just a Saturday in the boat with Doug on Mille Lacs and another sneaky central Minnesota lake to be left unnamed.
Yeah, that's fine. We do that. We call it Lake X. Everyone has their Lake X.
So, then moseyed on down here Sunday, waited for you to get back from Mexico, and then off we went on our adventure the last 36 hours or whatever it was. So, over to southwest Arkansas. So,
yeah,
for the frog hunt extravaganza.
Yeah, Steve Bowman, 2020 inductee into the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, done a lot with the ESPN Outdoors, still does a lot with the Bassmaster Elite Series and Bassmaster over there. And so I didn't understand when we got into this. Here's what we're going to talk about today, folks. We're going to talk about the frog hunt, which led me to do a lot of deep thinking because lately I've done off-the-wall adventures in fishing, which I'll consider frog hunting fishing, but that have pushed my limits of comfort, my boundaries of comfort. And one of the things, I am a man of routine when I am here, whether it's, you fish the Thursday nighter and we fish these 5 brush piles, and then you fish this division of this deal, which goes to the same lakes at the same time of the year. And it's real easy to get into a routine or a rut. And then you start bitching about it. There's nothing new. There's nothing exciting. You know what to expect. It's, do you catch the 5-pounder out of the brush pile? Do you not? Is Jim screwing you on the bank that you showed him, but then he got his boat and now he likes to go down it even though he knows it's your bank. Like then you start to get upset about stuff and you kind of lose with the risk of sounding like Randy Blockett, you lose the mystery, the mystique of, new experiences, which is what we'll get into with the frog hunting. But I wanted to get into that with the fishing too, especially with you and your position at In Fisherman. I think it is healthy for every bass fisherman to get outside of their comfort zone every single year with new species, with new experiences.
Yeah, what do the kids say these days? Go touch grass, right? I think a lot of people would benefit from just going to touch water, right? No matter what it is, right? I mean, we were in a boat with an outboard. We didn't have a rod and reel in the boat the other night, but we were in that we had that mentality, right? We're going to go out and capture these critters. And yeah, we had to move some limbs, duck under vines, dodge some spiders, like you said, out of your comfort zone. Middle of the night in nowhere, Arkansas, completely new foreign experience, but holy cow, you and I were talking on the way back, we need to do that again, quick. Right. Cause it just kind of restokes the fire, puts another log on that fire to get out and explore, experience an adventure. Maybe it's a little different than what you're used to, but go touch some water.
And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money to do that either.
No.
I was thinking some of the new experiences. I got to fish Loch Ness last year, the Loch Ness or the Loch Ness Monster is. I got to go to Japan and do that. But like those are new experiences, but also just like at Lake Thunderbird when my buddy Jared Miller took me noodling.
Mm-hmm.
That's a new experience. Or when I went up and ice fished out of Minnesota, like that's a new experience. Or when like there's all sorts of new experiences that if you want to get exotic and plan for a year or two, you can, but also like in your backyard. Like right now, I'm super excited. We found a lake that's got a big walleye in it.
Okay.
Well, I've never like tried to target the walleye in Oklahoma, especially with forward facing or anything like that. But I love catching walleye. So I'm like jacked up to go out to this lake this summer with a jig and a small plastic and try to target walleye.
Right. No, I mean, back to this frog hunt, like you and I are completely geeked up about this leading up to, you know, taking the trip. And we didn't want to be those like pests, right? To ask Steve and his, you know, old college roommate who we went with as well.
Tim
like,
Friel.
Right. Like we wanted to kind of act cool, right? And kind of know what we're doing, but we had no clue what we were doing. No. So we didn't want to ask too many questions and be those like, you know, overbearing, you know, pests. So we just kind of went with the flow, asked a couple basic questions, and we just kind of did what they told us to do.
Yeah, right? We didn't even really know where we were going until we were about 1.5 miles away.
Sure. Yeah.
And
yeah. We were told to go to this town and then they'll send the waypoint. Once we reached that town, it was a little cryptic, and then we got a gate code and off we went. So,
so we'll talk a little bit about I feel like it's a good story. Like the whole thing is a good story because I feel like I'm an outdoorsman. I can handle my own. You know, Oklahoma, that type of thing.
Right. Yep.
And dude, I felt like such a city slicker.
100%. I mean, just that scene in the driveway before we, you know, took off on our little scouting trip, like we're decked out with our sun shirts. You were kind enough to outfit us with some pretty sweet Bucky's t-shirts, you know, leading into the 4th of July. So we had kind of uniforms on. It was, you know, we looked the part of city slickers, and you know, we had the headlamps going, ready to go, you know, ankle boots, long pants. Like we did what we were told, but like we look like complete tools.
Yeah. And just as far as like getting out there, like they were, you know, you ask about the snakes and like, we don't find them. We don't, you know, we don't see the rattlesnakes that much, except for this one time last year where we found a mom who had like 7 babies and look, here it is. And it was like right there. And then the other snakes. And then like we get down there and they're like, well, you know, let us know if you see the alligator that's next to the boat, which is like a 10-footer that lives there. And then Steve's like, here's a picture of the state record that came out of here 13 years ago.
Yeah. And you start to wonder, okay, did these folks like did they conspire to like, oh, let's scare the hell out of Todd?
No,
and Matt when
I think that's
here?
just, I mean, that's just like their everyday life. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like you get out of your normal comfort zone. So for them, like for Steve or for someone down there, like
Tim, like
scoping for giant crappie might be outside of his comfort zone.
Right.
Whereas, you know, putting a flat bottom in the bayou and grabbing frogs at 3 a.m. is something that he's done every single year for the last 40 years, which is the case with him and Tim. But so we get down there. We do like a perimeter ride along in the 4-wheeler. Can
we just take a minute though before we get going? Like, you know, they welcomed us with complete open arms, like the whole family. Opened, you know, one of the family's houses there on the camp premises, and just some of the absolute warmest, most welcoming, hospitable people. Just down home, good folks, and just made us feel super welcome. It was so shout out to the Friel family. And
if you hadn't watched on the show on Monday, we ended up in this predicament, this situation, because we agreed to bid on a Arkansas frog hunt experience that Steve Bowman offered at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame auction last fall.
Right.
So miraculously, we ended up getting it. We won it. So we were like, hey, we have to do this because frog season is the active part of frog season is shorter. I guess they were not happy campers with this change of the season in frog hunting in Arkansas.
Right. I think originally for the longest time, I guess the season opened on tax day, whatever, mid-April, right? April 15th. And then this year they pushed it back 6 weeks to June 1st. So, and you know, Tim and Steve were a little salty about that just because, you know, it changed up their routine. They weren't sure what we were going to find. And, you know, the water was a little high and, you know, so all the different factors were different than what they were used to seeing. But, you know, I would say we made it work, made the best of it.
It would be the equivalent of like you go to a lake every single year, like Mille Lacs.
Mhm.
Would be a good example, right? And
Yep.
you know, kind of, hey, these fish are going to be spawning. We're going to go there. We've done this annual trip every
Yep.
year. We know what we're going to catch. And then all of a sudden,
They close the lake for a
they
month and a half.
close the
Right?
lake for another
Till
month and a
August
half. And
1st.
when you come
Yeah.
back, there's not a single fish on the bed.
Right.
You have to re-find them. They're funky. They're in the post
Mhm.
spawn. I was completely unaware of this, but the frogs do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So like when you open it on April 15th, it's like pre-spawn spawn for frogs.
Apparently, yeah.
And they have these like orgy parties.
Yeah, there's really no other better term for it. The way it was described to us is like you could probably fill your limit in the size of this room, right?
Yeah.
So
And when we were there, I think it was like that's the way Tim said it. He said, you know, these are post-spawn frogs. So you're looking for frogs that are actually like out trying to find a crawdad or a fly or
Right.
something to eat, a
yeah,
mouse.
they're
something to
settled
eat.
into their summer pattern, right? Where they're just
Very
looking for
scattered.
a meal. Yeah.
So instead of seeking in Gara, going out and just getting all of these
Mhm.
frogs that are preoccupied, we actually had to kind of one here, one there, one here, one there.
Yeah, it was a run and gun pattern. So
But yeah, no, so we did a perimeter run which was awesome to see like their land and the land management that they have there. Looked for hogs. We saw one like kind of shadowy hog, like in the
that was a pretty interesting experience too. Like, cause like you said, these, you know, they're out there and it was, you know, it was still a good bit of daylight, but yeah, it was really difficult to spot them across that ditch. And you'd think you'd see one, you'd think you'd see the branches moving. And it was like, it was just ghostly, right?
Yeah,
you know,
that's a great example. For
So never really got a clean look at anything. They were always running away and being, you know, running away from us. But just a cool spot, sportsman's paradise for those that have the access to it.
and then the frog hunting itself was legitimately as redneck and as exhilarating as I hoped it would be.
It had every element of the redneck experience and lifestyle, right? Like flat bottom, tin boat, you know,
Big,
headlamps,
like 18 billion lumen handheld
hand lanterns, you know, and just like, you know, hand-to-hand combat with these little critters, you know.
I put some videos up on my Instagram story. I'll have a full video up there as well, but I'll show a couple pictures. That's what we ended up with. We ended up with like 29 frogs by the end of it, where you just like lean over the front of the boat. Tim was, he had a wheel, right? Though it wasn't a tiller steer.
No, it was a side console. Yeah.
He had a wheel.
So it worked out.
And then there's a picture of Todd right there. So literally these things like sit there and then you get up behind him and then you just boom.
Yeah.
And you grab them.
The snatch, right?
Yeah.
That's what we call it. There's this, you know.
But I think that as I don't know if I call myself an outdoorsman, as fishermen, you live for that anticipation, that moment, right? So like when I was down in Mexico, the biggest fish that I hooked, you know, a 10-4 on the Bubbas, like in the tournament, an hour left, and you have that it's on. And then you have that emotional experience of you trying to land it where every single split second of that fight is burned into your
every
brain.
turn of that reel handle matters, right? Yep.
But that's because it's something rare that doesn't happen every time. It's something on the line. So, and it was the exact same way with those frogs, because you had Steve that was finding the frogs in the back, and Tim that's driving the boat up there, and you that's you had three people behind you, and you feel the pressure. You've got the frog in your side. Like, it's a new experience. You're not exactly sure how to grab them, what's going to happen, how it's going to look out. But it is that thing that I think why literally millions of people fish around the world is for that feeling, that moment.
So we came on with 28, 29, right? And we probably had 50 opportunities.
We missed 17.
Yeah. So give or take, 45 to 50 opportunities at frogs, legit opportunities. And you're right. I hadn't thought about it that way, but each of those opportunities was like looking at a bedfish, right? You were joking with me yesterday. Like, I didn't realize it till you said it, but like, I guess we'd ease up on them. And every time it was my shot at it, I would say, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" I would like literally look the frog in the eye and talk to it like it was going to respond. Right.
Buddy?
Yeah. And then, more often than not, he wound up in my hand, but, a few got away. But, yeah, it's 100%. I agree with what you said. It's the same. It's different, but it's kind of the same experience, right? You're always learning. Like I was kind of like trying to read in the water where the lights were, and you could see how the grass was, and you're like, holy cow, this all looks fishy, But we were there to deal with the frogs, and yeah, like you're always learning something, regardless if you're out traditionally fishing or just doing a different experience in the outdoors.
More video on that'll come out on my Instagram. I'll send it with you. We've got a bunch of pictures, a bunch of video. It was awesome. But that led me to what I wanted to talk about today. Probably a little bit shorter show today. I think I'm going to take you down to Oklahoma City, see where the the Oklahoma Sooners play.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that college.
The college play football. Maybe we'll get a swirl from the Mont.
Okay.
There on Boyd Street. But I thought it tied into it because, like I said, you are what's your title at In Fisherman again?
Publisher.
Publisher.
Yes.
Head publisher? Or just publisher?
Just publisher. Yeah.
What does publisher mean?
I just oversee the day-to-day of the entire brand.
The entire brand.
Yeah, magazine, TV show.
And you spent how many years at Bass Fan just doing the bass thing?
Just a little over 8 years there. 8+ years. So.
And you're how far into In Fisherman?
5+.
So you deal with a lot more, fair to say, multi-species anglers at In Fisherman than you do at Bass Fan.
Yeah, 100%. I think we covered this ground the other day. It's like the way I describe it to people is, covering the bass tournament side is kind of like you're down the corridor or the terminal of an airport, right? And at In Fisherman, I'm kind of out in the main concourse, the lobby, so to speak. So, obviously, largemouth, smallmouth, the bass category is still very popular on a wider scale, tournament and non-tournament stuff. But yeah, we have a very rabid audience when it comes to all the other, game fish in the freshwater space.
Are hardcore multi-species anglers happier than dedicated tournament anglers or just bass fishermen? That's a serious question. Because it seems to me, and I mean, like I said, this is a bubble.
Right.
But it seems to me like there's a lot of bass anglers, whether you're a club guy all the way up to the BPT and Elite Series, they just doesn't bring them overt joy on a daily basis.
And I think that largely stems from there's something always on the line with those guys, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's 10, 15, $50 on a Tuesday or Thursday versus, $5,000 in some situations. So there's always something on the line. There's that built-in pressure that comes with that versus, the average guy that just wants to go out and, catch a limited walleye and, fill the freezer that week. Same with crappie guys. They're just out enjoying. They're just out there, like we said earlier, touching water, putting to use the skills that they've learned over the years from, mom, uncle, granddad, brothers, what have you, just enjoying the outdoors and fishing. And, maybe they're employing tools and tips that they read in Fisherman one day. But, I would say by and large, those everyday multi-species anglers, they don't have that weight hanging over them that the tournament guys do, I would say. Agreed?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is an interesting conversation because a lot of the bass guys have the means and they have the vessel and they have the equipment to go out and try to or to catch whatever they want. Yet I know guys who haven't targeted another species or not launched their boat without some form of tournament fishing, practice for a tournament, thinking about what was coming up in years and years. But if I look back on my top memories over the last 5 years of fishing, a lot of those are not bass related.
Right.
And that's not a knock on bass, but I think that's what is. I get this question a lot. Do you ever get the question like, do you get burned out on that? Like, how do you not get burned out? Eat, sleep, breathe, doing something 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Well, there was a period there where when I was, working at Bass Fan where there was a little element of that.
But you were just dealing with bass.
Right. But it was like, a bit of a hamster wheel, right? Off season, new season, some faces change. The kind of the storylines remain the same a little bit, but there's just kind of the same routine, the same kind of rough schedule. And, now at In Fisherman, there's just a lot more variety, right? Like, the comfort zone thing you mentioned earlier, it's like, I would fish some local tournaments, whether it was a co-angler or not. And, it was largely 100% bass focused. But now in my role at In Fisherman, I'm been afforded the opportunities to go, do, work on our TV show and do other content around other species. Like, I never thought I'd be fishing for, Lake sturgeon in the St. Clair River, in Michigan. I've done that twice, and that's a freaking awesome experience. Like, I would go do that every fall, right? And, trolling Lake Ontario for salmon and steelhead, king salmon, just amazing sport fish, that, people come from all over to try to experience, the whole muskie crowd, the pike crowd. I went to Saskatchewan this, winter for 4 days and experienced minus 40 degree, temperatures and ice fishing in those conditions. And, trying to get pictures of fish before they froze stiff, just like stuff. You just put a push pin in it. You're like, man, I'll never forget that and hope to get to do that again, versus trying to go catch 14 inches on a Thursday. Right. So, or,
if you're doing it for the weekend and you're tired and you've got a deal, like, I can't tell you how many times I've grinded through a day of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I went up to Canada with my uncle and went out and caught, smallmouth bass in the morning and came across a weed bed and was like, ooh, that's why I brought the bigger meps.
Yeah.
And tied it on and caught some pike.
Yep.
And then at like 9:30, 10, he's like, hey, Neff, my back's hurting a little. You want to take me back? And then when I got back to the dock, I was like, you know what? I could take a nap. And I went in, I slept until 1 and then went back out there. Like, I think none of us got into this to be stressed out or to be angry at what was happening off the water or to feel like it was a life or death situation or to be financially irresponsible. But it just seems like it's very easy to get into that trap these days.
Oh, 100%.
And I think you're the perfect guest just to remind people out here, like, dude, this multi-species stuff, or even if it's just a different, like, you have an article in this one. And like I said, I've no connection within fishermen, just other than my affinity for it for 4 decades.
Yeah.
Classic bass lures revisited. And we talked about that before, but like, I was like, I've got several of those lures, but when was the last time you're as a bass guy, you went out and you really tried to catch one on a freaking jitterbug?
Yeah. Yeah. You've got a shadow box here in the house that has all those, a whole slew of classic lures. Like, to your point, like, when was the last time you took out Grandpa's tackle box and tried
I
to
was
catch
like,
him
dude,
on that?
That would be freaking fun. Like, get on a lake where there's a bite.
Right.
And try to catch them on those 60s, 70s, 80s lures that aren't like, heirlooms that if you lose, you have to remortgage the house. But like, find something that's fun. Fishing doesn't have to be bass fishing, tournament related fishing. And this is coming from a podcast that covers it every single day for the last 21 years. I think it's more fun when you get back into it, when you have all those other experiences.
Back to your original question, does it bring these multi-species? Are they more, joyful, right? It's all about doing something that brings you joy and happiness. Like, the last 2 years after I cast, me and a friend from back home and his son he loads up his canoe or his, little plastic boat. I'll load up a kayak and we'll head to, central northern Ontario for a couple of days of tent camping, portaging these rivers up there. It's a hellacious logging road to get to the access point. And it's a lot of hard work and a little bit of, there's some puckering up on this road where, you're not sure if your truck tires are going to make it through. And it's like, there's some elements you're like, okay, what am I doing this for? But then like you get there and the payoff is like, oh, we're here. I get to do this experience. This is going to be awesome. And we get to touch water. So
plus you get to meet new people that have different experiences, that are experts in their field. Like, we'd never met Tim before. It was Steve's buddy from, but by the end of it, he was giving us a hard time when we'd miss a frog or laughing about it. And then you learn about him. And at one point I was like, is there like a is there like a KVD of frogging around here?
Yeah, and they said, yeah, you're in the boat with them.
Yeah, it was kind of quiet, and Steve was like, you're in the boat with them. That's how he said it.
Right.
You're in the boat with them.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I was. And then, he was like super chill with us missing him. But then when I started asking, I was like, like how many? He's like, I'm usually, I've been the frog grabber.
Right.
Because I do it with the hand. I'm like, what's your grab to get ratio? And he's like, usually if you miss more than 2 a night, he goes, you don't get
subbed out.
Yeah, you don't get a chance.
Right.
And he's like, I've been the grabber for the last 30, 40 years. Meaning that over the last 40 years of frog hunting, there has not been a time where he has missed more than 2 frogs in an evening, and we missed 9 apiece respectively. Yeah.
But I mean, I will say, it's not like you or I, we didn't half-ass any of those attempts, right? Like we were giving it our all. Every approach was new, different angle, different obstacle in the way. Like, and they gave us, I mean, we have to talk about this gig, right? Like that tool that they had, this makeshift clamp on the end of an 8 to 10 foot
it was a puncture-free gig.
Yeah. They had like a, passive spring-loaded thing on it. So you put a little pressure on it, or, when you would we'd make that spearing action towards the frog, it would lock them down. Wouldn't hurt them, wouldn't puncture them. But you had to get that in the boat quick because those suckers slither out of there, as we learned. But, I feel like it was like 2 painter sticks glued or taped together in the middle.
Definitely.
So
definitely.
I mean, there was some upgrades you can make to it if you wanted to put it in production, but it worked for what we needed it for. So, but
as bass fishermen, and obviously there's a lot of bass fishermen listening to Bass Talk Live.
I'd hope so.
But there's 2 things here. We're experts in a field that a lot of other people who fish enjoy catching bass, but don't have the level of expertise in bass fishing. They don't have a boat or the tackle for it or anything, but they'd love to get out and catch smallmouth or a largemouth or something. And we also all have multiple devices to get connected with someone in a different field, whether it's blue cats, stripers on Texoma, where you can say, hey man, we all know those people. Like, I can't tell you, I've had some guys that like, man, I want to get in the boat with you and bass fish. And I'm like, yeah, but I want you to teach me, how you catch those wipers on the river. Right. Okay. Right. Like, take advantage of that. That's where the fun's at. That's where it's at. And then you can take it one step further. If you're one of those sickos who has to relate it back to something, is think of all the greatest athletes of all time, multi-sport stars, right? Now, I know we're in a day and age where it's a lot easier to, got guys who say, hey, you have to pick a sport. But, Wayne Gretzky was always a big proponent of playing multiple sports, soccer, basketball, baseball. Man,
you and I grew up in the Dion and Bo Jackson era, right?
Right. So, but a lot of the best, most natural anglers, like a Steve Kennedy, for example, when it comes to reading water and current seams and things like that with trout or like there's elements that you can't learn in bass fishing, but that are applicable in bass fishing that you can learn through other species too. Yep.
100%. And like I said, I mean, even this frog fishing experience, like, wasn't a rod or reel on the boat, but there was still an opportunity to kind of learn and read the water. I mean, there, cedar trees for days down there. And, we've made several comments like, man, you guys pull spinnerbaits by these trees all the time, so we were all, the wheels were turning obviously, but, like this goes back to the more time you spend outside, the more joy it'll bring you, whether you're on the water or off. But the recommendation from here is get on the water somehow, some way. Right. Yeah. So,
I mean, there's a lot of guys that that they fish whatever's in season or whatever is going at that time. Right. And not just one species year round. Yep. And especially if you tournament fish, if you travel, like, just take time out of your grind in the bass fishing. And if you're somewhere where there's, if you are up at the St. Lawrence, spend a day throwing carp fishing off the bank. Like, that's been my biggest regret so far when I've been up to the St. Lawrence, and you watch what Dave Mercer has done up there and some of those guys, is I want to catch one of those giant carp, but I've never done it. But this past year, what did I do? I stayed extra. I went out with my boy Travis Manson to Smallmouth Crush in the aluminum out in Ontario, and we trolled for the salmon, and we ended up catching, the lake trout. We're out there in 5-footers and crap like it, and we're trolling, and it was like a freaking awesome experience. I took my dad up to after one of the tournaments. He drove up to Lake Erie. Went out with Michael Simonton on the mud flats. Used spreader rigs with minnows to catch 8-9 inch perch. Had no idea what I was doing. We're anchored in a mud flat around all this. Like, it was awesome. It was the first time I'd fished with my dad in like 4 or 5 years at that point. But I was out of my comfort zone. I would have never been anchored in a mud flat catching those perch. And then we took them afterwards and we ate them. And then,
but it's not
months
really
later.
I wouldn't say it's really out of your comfort zone. I mean, the target is a little different. At the end of the day, it's still fishing. It's just you're learning, right? You're learning a new technique for a different species. And so maybe at the end of the day, you're not as uncomfortable as you may seem in the moment, but
it's all about experience. There's a lot of opportunity for new experiences, for thrills, for adrenaline rushes, for things in fishing.
And here's a shameless plug. I'll tie it back to the Hall of Fame. Like, in this upcoming fall, and we do the induction banquet in Springfield in late September, like, the auction's still taking shape, but I promise you there's going to be experiences much like this frog hunt that we went on. That'll be, available in the silent auction that, people should be on the lookout for. But, I don't know if I do it again. Like, I don't want to spoil that first experience. Like, you just want that first experience, right? Like, we were talking, I had the opportunity to go to the Masters last year. You went this year, and it's like, I had some FOMO this year because I wasn't there, but it's like, I don't want to maybe necessarily go back again. Would I? Of course. But it's like, you have that one time that you can always look back on and remember. And this frog hunting trip was kind of one of those things.
Frog hunting trip, we've got it. You're holding it properly. I've got the picture pulled up there. I mean, you can't fake a smile like that.
I'm trying to remember how many, when I did grab them, like, obviously the goal is you want to grab them, you bring them in the boat and they're face up. I want to say more than half of mine came, I had them upside down. You know what I mean?
Your hand.
But it was just, that was the comfortable angle to get after them. But
but it worked. A little PSA today. I figured we had fishermen in the house, and we were coming off of a unique experience that neither of us had. And, just getting up early. I was so freaking tired yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you were functioning yesterday.
I wasn't functioning yesterday. Yeah. Like, I called Court before I went to bed, and she's like, "Are you drunk?" I'm like, "No, I'm just so tired. Like, my allergies were bad."
Yeah, that last hour in the boat was a bit of an illusion. You were on your last gasp there in the boat. What was that, Monday night?
Yeah. So, well, we stayed out till 3 a.m. We're trolling, like, idling in, and I could have swore. So, like, if you picture it in the boat, like, like Todd sitting in the bow seat, up on the front of this boat, sit down like a Bill dance chair.
Yeah.
And I was like behind him, sitting on a cooler, and I could have sworn. And it's 3 a.m, and I have, the day before I'd had a 18-hour trip home from Mexico.
Right.
Long story short, I'm on like 4 hours of sleep in 72 hours. No exaggeration.
Right. Yep.
It's like 3 a.m. We've been staring at these damn frogs. And I swear that you had like turned around and you were like handing me, I didn't know what, but you were handing me something and I thought, oh, it's like in the morning in my depth perception. So I'm like trying to grab, you're like back like this, handing it to me. I'm behind you on the cooler. So I'm like trying to grab it.
Yep. And I see your left hand over my shoulder, your hand's over my left shoulder. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, Matt was like, I thought you were trying to hand me something. My hands were in my lap. I was not moving whatsoever.
Yeah, I was hallucinating. It was so bad. Yeah. I was so tired. I'm still exhausted.
Yeah.
But it was well worth it. Yeah. So cannot thank Tim and Steve enough.
Yep.
It's cool also seeing guys, like I had Juice come over last night.
Yep.
Hooked you up with some Juice's jigs.
They did. That's man, that was a surprise, a pretty cool keepsake there from
He's trying to
Jared.
Grease the wheel. I
could tell, but
he's done that to numerous people though. Like he's a legit dude.
Super talented guy. And we cooked frog legs 3 ways. Is that what we're gonna call last night?
Yeah, we did. What were the 3 that we did? I know we did
fried
the fried.
We blackened them and then we smoked them and then finished them on the on the Blackstone.
On the Blackstone.
That that was the preferred method.
It was unreal.
Smoke, then blacken on the flat top.
But it was cool, like Juice and I we met through fishing, Sooner bass anglers in college. Been really good friends ever since. He's going to be the best man at my wedding. But then to watch Steve and Tim,
right,
who
connected in college, right,
were college buddies.
And here they are 40 years later.
They've got 40 years of outdoor trips and experience between them.
Yep.
To sit back and watch us and know that those guys had been through so much crap over the decades out on the water and in the woods was cool.
Oh yeah.
And that's something, that's a friendship that is earned. Like you can't build that bond with another human being without all those hours together in the
and
woods.
You could even tell like just the way
stories.
Steve, the way Steve interacted with, Tim's family. Like he's basically an adopted, son, brother, in that Friel family. Yep. So that, yeah, those sorts of relationships they're hard to find. And once you do find them, man, you don't want to let them go. So.
And that's cool. One of the things I like about In Fisherman is you talk about those. Really, I was talking about you before the show with you about this, but that North with Doc at the back that Greg Knowles always writes.
Yeah, it's just relatable content. It's
about the relationships between the group of guys, man.
Yep. Yeah, relatable, sometimes humorous. There's always a takeaway from that, from North with Doc. So some of our most popular content that gets a ton of feedback. So
yeah. Get the latest issue in Fisherman Rumble with River Smallies. I am charging $20 per autograph for the Master Angler. The Master Angler photo that I have in here, if you guys want me to. I got no problem.
58 or 59, I think.
Yeah, page 56, bottom right there. There's the 15
right in the gutter.
15 and a quarter inch crappie for the old Master Angler Award. So
yeah.
Just letting everyone know.
Not to leave out your cohort, Matt Steffen, who's also not featured with a photo, but he's in the list. He made the list. So maybe next year, Matt.
I appreciate it. All right, we're going to wrap things up. This has been another edition of Bass Talk Live. Thursday, tomorrow.
Yeah. Is it tomorrow? Thursday?
Yeah, tomorrow's Thursday. We're going to go into town, and then tomorrow
they're blurring together, dude.
Yeah, I know we lost the camera when I dropped this. I hit it. We must have a when I tossed it down. Yeah, 2 times in a row. But all right, we will talk to everybody later. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for jumping on the shows.
Thanks for hosting me, man. Been a blast.
The Bass Fishing Hall of Fame there with Tim and Steve opening their skill set to a new one. Go out, learn something new, catch something new.
Right, touch water.
All right, we'll talk to everyone later. See ya.